I'd like to take this opportunity of welcoming all those who have registered. I must just share with you, we closed off this morning at 500 in attendance, which would be both on Zoom as well as on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining us. Just by way of an introduction, I'd like to welcome you to the world of our world and that of AFP, which is actually officially known as the South African Association of Fleet Professionals. And to introduce our discussion, I'd like to give you or share with you a quote from Walt Disney. And this is our view, certainly at Master Drive and at AFP. Walt Disney said, "We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps us leading down new paths." So certainly in the case of fleet management, this is one of the instances where we're exploring new paths, because in the words of the Global Fleet Director for Ashblyth, who currently have the second largest fleet to the United States government, the global director said, "The fleet manager that masters data analytics will be the hero of their organization." So please join with me as we unpack and take you on a brief history of fleet management. If you think back on what happened in 1997, you will probably remember it for the introduction of Harry Potter, the movie Titanic, and of course the sad death of Diana. It may interest you to know that the average capacity on the hard drive on a computer was sitting at 1.2 gigabytes in 1996, and it doubled in 1997 to close to 2.4. But what also happened in 1997, we have the earliest identifiable global fleet management role identified. And the person that was involved there was Teresa Bragazzoni, who in 1997 was appointed as the global fleet manager for Johnson & Johnson. So as we take a quick ride down memory lane, we see the history of fleet management starts in the 1970s, where we had basic tracking. The 1980s, with the advent of desktop computing, it enabled us to take this a step further. And then, of course, in 1990, GPS technology became more prevalent, and therefore today, some 28 years later, we have what we have today. But the future of fleet management is characterized by increased automation, data-driven decision-making, and as the trends develop in the adoption of electric vehicles, advanced telematics, AI, predictive maintenance, and autonomous driving, we're faced with the challenges of being able to do this and do it well. So fleet managers struggle with the significant change in markets, and as a result of its impact on supply chain management, businesses need to get ahead, and the individual that is going to drive that in many instances is that of the fleet manager. So we started our journey in November in 2004, and as a result, we launched the Association of Fleet Professionals. Today, we're glad to take you through the inaugural Colloquium of AFP, in which instance we're going to share with you a few things of insightful information and the way forward. We'd like to then have a look at this inaugural event, and we're going to take you to the AFP website, which we gave you a hint a while ago that it would be coming, and we've been teasing you on an ongoing basis. So if we can now move to the website, please. The website will reflect the honorary advisory panel that we have that makes it possible for us to be able to deliver expert information. And as you've noticed there, we have several industry captains, individuals who are experts in their own field that will be available to assist us as we take this journey forward. So moving on to the website, we now look at what is possible. If you'd like to make a note of the web link over there, it will be shared with you by way of information in the thank you pack that will follow. So as we open up the website, you'll notice, and this is what is probably of most interest to everyone concerned, is what do you do to become a member? We have established 3 levels of membership. The first one, which is the fleet professional, which is the individual. And as you page down, you'll notice the significant benefits that will be offered to the individual who signs up as a member of the AFP. Obviously, there are corporates who would like to join with us in this journey moving forward. So there is an opportunity for corporate membership that organizations will be able to subscribe to ensure that not only do fleet managers get the latest and greatest information, but other individuals in the organization, such as supervisors, financial managers, and the like. The last area that we look at is that of the support organization, fleet support providers. And in that we have, amongst others, we could take today as an example where we have experts on supply chain management. We will have providers of telematics, OEMs, tire suppliers, petroleum companies, finance houses, FML industries, and a host of others who would like to join us in this journey and who have already expressed an interest in becoming advisors to fleet members of this organization. So with that behind us, we're now going to go into the actual colloquium, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to introduce one of our first guest speakers. The guest speaker that we have today who will be delivering the keynote address is Winstone. He is the Managing Director of GridCars. But just before we move into the introduction, Winstone, I'd just like to share some of the information with you. The Industrial Revolution that took place in many years previously moved us from agriculture and handcrafts into economies that were based on large-scale industry. And so too today, the fleet manager has to move from what was antiquated technology, possibly fossil fuels, into the advent of NEVs, new energy vehicles. And one of those new energy vehicles is, of course, the electric vehicle. So we'd like you to unpack your theme for us, please, Winstone. And the topic is Electrification Revolution. Our EV infrastructure is transforming fleet operations and sustainability. So we'd like to hand over to you, Winstone, and we give you our full attention.
Great. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking here. All right. So basically, I'm going to just give you a quick run through what's really happening in the electric vehicle industry, a little bit of a South African perspective.
We can't hear you. Just give us a moment.
Is that working now?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So, all right. Thank you. A great pleasure to be speaking at your conference, and really hope to give you some sort of idea of what's happening within the electric vehicle space. You know, I often, when I'm speaking to people, I realize that the fact that we don't know is, I think a lot of people are going to get blindsided by how quickly this industry is changing. So I'm hoping to give you a little bit of a sense of what is happening, the reality on the ground, and how that'll look, you know, going a little bit ahead into the future. Just quickly make my slides work. There we go. All right. So first, just to cover some basics, because I think a lot of people see electric vehicles as, you know, golf cars, or, you know, maybe a desirable thing by a person that's a little bit more of an environmentalist. They don't realize that this is actually the next level of the technology. So if you look at a fossil fuel vehicle, you've got 7 units of energy that go into the vehicle, and 6 of them go out of the back, are lost. They're lost in the form of noise, pollution, heat, various things like that. But effectively, those units are lost, and only 1 unit actually gets to the wheels in terms of driving the vehicle forward. When you move over to electric, it's the other way around. So there's only about 1 of the 7 units gets lost, normally to heat, and 6 of those 7 units are actually used to drive the vehicle forward. So it's a massive change in efficiency of vehicles and vehicle technology. So if we quickly have a look, just by the way, the pictures of the engines are to scale. So it'll give you some sort of idea of what they look like. Electric motors are faster, they have more torque, they're lighter in weight, they're lower in maintenance, they're smaller in size, and in the long term, they will be lower in price. So in every metric that you would measure an engine on, this is a better engine or a better motor. So to give you some quick views then, a diesel engine that would be a typical, you know, maybe a Cummins diesel engine or something like that. You're typically talking about 500 parts, whereas in an electric motor, you're right down to 10. So everything becomes more reliable. And a small motor is 180 kilowatts in power, whereas a standard engine might only be 75 kilowatts. So it gives you some idea of how much more powerful and modern an electric motor is. Again, it's a modern technology. It's not about this being a cool thing. It's really just better. Again, diesel engine drivetrain, electric drivetrain, a diesel engine along with its gearbox, an electric motor along with its controller, gives you again that scale difference. So you can see it's not the end of the story. Electric vehicles do need to have big batteries in them. So there is a counter to that. Hopefully I'll talk a little bit more to that as we go. And then the final one is really around supporting of the actual technology. So you can see a petrol engine, really lots and lots of parts. Electric motors, much, much more efficient. This plays into that maintenance thing. When we're talking fleet, maintenance is a big deal. So that whole efficiency cycle is critical. So electrification is not just a shift in the fuel type, it's a revolution in thinking about electric and understanding how that works. The big questions that people are always asking is the infrastructure ready? You know, are the vehicles already entering the market? And, you know, and at the end of the day, we've got to understand how this is going to impact the drivers, the systems, and the policies. And that's what the shift is about. It is different. I'm not the type of person that normally says, no, but electric cars are going to be the same as petrol cars, you know, only thing is they run on electricity. It is a different technology. And this does mean there's a different value chain. These different models, these different ways that we fuel them, and different mindsets that you've got to have when you're operating them. And again, I think that plays strongly into the fleet side of this. So let's jump right into it. You know, are there any chargers in South Africa? Yes, there are. The ones on the left-hand side are what we call DC fast chargers. So they can charge a typical vehicle in somewhere between 20 minutes and an hour. And on the right side is AC chargers. They're sort of slower overnight chargers. They would take a few hours to charge a typical vehicle. So this just gives you an idea of how many chargers there are across the country already today. This is not a vision, this is not a dream. These are operating, running chargers that people are using every single day across the country. And I think, so hopefully this gives you an idea that this is not a revolution that is coming. It's a revolution that is here. It is happening and it's changing how we do things. This just gives you a view of how much charging has actually been done in South Africa. So if you look at that, that really comes close to 200 megawatt hours in a single month. Now, to keep it really, really simple, it's millions of kilometers. You know, so we are seeing, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of kilometers being driven monthly on the normal roads here in South Africa. And this shows how that growth curve has grown and how it's expanded. You know, I often think back to April in 2020 when we had a lockdown. You can see it down there in the little that little number. And the month before April, we were looking and saying, but that's such a huge month. And now we're right down to next to nothing in April. Well, you know, we really have changed since then, and the industry has just run forward in terms of where the technology is. So what are the benefits and what are the things that will change? Firstly, the benefits of electrification. The operational costs and will be lower. Okay, so any operational cost within a fleet is going to be lower. It's part of the efficiencies, and it's about price stability. You can put in solar at your site, and what you can do with that solar is ultimately it locks your price in for the next 20 years. You're not exposed to fluctuations in the petrol price or the diesel price. So it's really something that operationally makes so much more sense and is more suited. It'll improve your ESG scoring, it's lower in CO2 reductions. It's really a lot lower in maintenance. There's technology improvements in monitoring. You mentioned earlier in your introduction around the idea that, you know, telemetry and these things. Electric vehicles thrive on telemetry, and it's really important for them because we need to understand what is happening with my battery, what's the state of charge, where is it? It's an asset that needs to be managed. It's also much, much more amenable to the driverless side of things. So we're going to see more and more driver assistance, certainly over the next 10 years. And then beyond that, starting to see more driverless type vehicles coming in as well. The fuel suddenly becomes linked to electricity. And I don't, again, it's one of these things that I think people have a very underappreciate how powerful that is. So now means instead of you having to deal with fossil fuel, petrol, and electricity, you're dealing with only one thing, which means you can oversize that. You can put renewables in, you can put batteries in, you can build reliably into your electrical infrastructure, which ultimately builds reliability into your fuel infrastructure. And these things really make a business far more competitive. And then the idea of the collaborative financing. So you can look at leveraging the fact that you're financing a renewable solution for your site, but at the same time, that gives you load shedding resilience, it gives you power independence, lowers your electricity price, and it contributes to your transport. There are some challenges that we have to face. The first one, the initial capex costs are higher, but overall, the logistics companies are seeing that this is a positive number. In other words, if you look at the saving in operations costs versus the additional capital costs, it really is a lower cost vehicle in the space. These maybe grid constraints might need to look at more moving towards new renewables and more supporting the grid, not replacing the grid. I believe it's a collaboration that we've got to have. We said there's lower productivity, and that's obvious. The reason the lower productivity is just simply because you've got a charging time that you have to cater for. So you need to manage that into your driving cycle. So when your drivers are taking breaks, the car should be on charge, or the vehicle should be on charge. So it's about managing those things that you start to overlap that a little bit more. Previously, if your driver was taking a break, you didn't have to make sure the car was being filled up with diesel. You could do those two things in sequence. Now you want to try and do those in parallel. The operational complexity goes up slightly because you are now dealing with making charging stops, batteries, all of those sort of things. Driver training within the EV space is critical. The drivers can make a huge difference to the actual efficiency of the vehicle, the longevity of the battery. All of these sort of things get done. And just by pure habit of making sure, plug the vehicle in when you stop, making sure that those choices are in the right place. And right now, the vehicle choices are a little bit limited. So there's not that many companies that have got vehicles in the market. That's changing on the passenger side, but on the fleet side, we're still going to see a little bit more time before those catch up into it. And overall, you've got to be able to use this as an opportunity to get the most out of your fleet. So really, you need to understand where chargers are and whether you have an opportunity to book those chargers. So book them. You need to understand the realistic ranges of your vehicles. Driver behavior. Drivers need to be aware of range and how the vehicles work. They need to understand battery health and understand the instant torque that they have, regenerative braking, how that benefits the vehicles. All of these things are critical to being able to drive an efficient electric fleet. And then diagnostic reporting is critical for electric vehicles to be able to monitor your batteries, understand your state of health, state of charge, where you are with these things. Managing and charging with roaming agreements. So what can happen is you can have special pricing at certain charging stops. So you might have a partnership with a particular charging stop, and that charging stop gives you a preferred rate. And that means that you've got to then manage when you're going to be at those charges, make sure you plan that a little bit better. You need to also just profile the routes correctly, because some routes may not be suitable for electric. There are routes today, like through Uppington, that don't necessarily have chargers on them yet. Give us a couple of months, maybe we'll see them there. But based on that, you want to then profile that electric vehicles don't go driving to Uppington, rather use the Cape Town route or the Durban route or any of those routes that do have chargers on them. And then the whole ESG benefits and how that plays into the overall strategy within the business. So don't underestimate the rate of change. And I think this is something that a lot of people definitely underestimate, is how quickly these changes can happen. So the first part about rate of change, and that is that generally when people see changes, there's a lot of resistance to it. There's a lot of holding back and saying, oh, I trust this more, I'm reliant on that. And that rate of change means that those people slow that down. The problem is once those people are convinced, then they just stop and they change to the new technology. So we are in the next few years going to see a very rapid, aggressive change over into this new thing. The change is a huge technology improvement. We have better technology on the ground, vehicles are more efficient, and they're more technology rich. So the technology has come of age. This is not a case of we've suddenly introduced electric now. Electric cars, vehicles were electric before they were petrol or before they were fuel. And essentially, the technology around electric and battery has really come of age. With all of the new things that we've developed, we are now able to deliver electric vehicles that are going to be here and be here for a long time. We often see people talking about piloting, and they say, oh, they want to pilot to see if the technology is available. No, the technology is the technology. If you're going to be doing a pilot today, the pilot should be on the impact to your business. How are you going to be changing your business and reincorporating the electric vehicles into those technologies? The real impact is it's a fundamental change to how you fuel. So you don't just fuel, you might fuel more often, but you're fueling with a more renewable source, a more flexible source. Those sort of things are going to change how that works. And, so you've got to just get comfortable with the adoption and how you're going to be adopting that going forward. So this is a picture. I think maybe some of you have already seen it. The one on the left was taken in 1900, and it's taken in New York City. So Fifth Avenue, New York City. And there was only one automotive vehicle in this. You can see it circled there in red, so I'm not going to make you guess where it is. But all of the rest of them were horses and carriages. But one car was on that road. 13 years later, Fifth Avenue, New York City, same place. And there's only a single horse that is in that area. Everything was electric vehicles, well, vehicles. In this time, a lot of these would have been electric, just by the way. But the bottom line is that was a 13-year shift. Can you imagine a 13-year shift today if we had to move from having fossil fuel vehicles in a logistics channel right over to having electric? Now, it might seem like a long time. Golden Arrow has moved their vehicles, and they've moved them in 1 year. They've made a decision. Now they will not be buying diesel vehicles any longer. They'll only buy electric. I'm aware of other logistics companies that have got commitments that over the next 2 years, they plan to replace 500 vehicles into electric vehicles. So the aggression of how quickly that move is coming is certainly coming in the market. There's always a big question around jobs, and people say, oh, but we're going to be losing jobs. I'm sometimes a little bit blunt with this one. I say, yes, you will lose jobs if you're not prepared to change your job. But really what's going to happen is jobs are going to change. Jobs are going to evolve. It just so happens that we're going to be in a time now where that evolution is going to be really, really quick. So what we've got to be prepared to do is prepared to put some extra effort into training. So I'm going to take 10 years to transition a job. It might only take 2 years. So you've really got to look at how do we do this. You've got to make explicit plans for yourself, but for your employees as well, on how those changes are going to happen. And having this sort of change in jobs is really, really normal in any industry. The only difference here is we're going to be doing a little bit more under pressure, simply because we've spent the last 10 years saying, electric vehicles are not coming. And when they get here, that change is going to be more rapid. So I think it's a lot about how do you adjust and how do you plan for that. Just a quick overview. I mentioned Golden Arrow a little bit earlier. They're the only ones who've done a proper pilot. And these are what they're saying are the savings. So 70% saving on fuel, a 50% saving on spare parts, 80% saving on lubricants and oils, no impact on tires. Okay, we still have to have tires. In fact, I might go the other way and say plus 10%, because people like to accelerate a bit harder in electric vehicles. And then labor about a 30% estimated saving on the vehicles. So it really does give you a good saving onto a fleet vehicle. I want to cover just very briefly a discussion of stranded assets. Now, this is a complex drive. I'm sure they'll share the slides with you. This just shows the difference between electric and diesel vehicles. But I'm going to move on to the next slide, which really simplifies this down. And it simplifies it down in that the green line is the total OPEX and CAPEX cost for an electric vehicle. So if we start today, we can see that's more expensive. The black line is a diesel vehicle's total cost. So taking in OPEX and CAPEX as well. So right now they're cheaper. There's going to come a time we'll cross over where electric vehicles will become cheaper. The interesting point for me is that there's a further time, if you look at the red arrow called the stranded asset, where the full cost, the cost of an electric vehicle plus the operational cost of that electric vehicle becomes less than the operational cost of a diesel vehicle. And at that point, you have a stranded asset. So you have a diesel vehicle that nobody will pay you to take. In other words, you may have to pay people to take the diesel vehicle. So the value of the diesel vehicle drops to zero. And we can debate when that time is. Some industries, we believe that time is going to be 2028, 2027 potentially. In other industries, maybe as far out as 2030 or 2033. So you've got to have a look at your fleet and understand how this is going to work, and when is the point at which that stranded asset becomes a challenge, because you really do need to have changed to electric before that time. There's quite a few myths that a lot of people talk about in the industry. I'm going to quickly just scan over them and tell you that, when they talk about electric vehicles and say they're still powered by coal, well, that's just much, much more efficient. And based on the efficiency, it's still a better decision. Lithium mining causes environmental damage. Yeah, I agree, it does. But we use lithium for our laptops, our cell phones, for everything. So let's fix the problem and not stop the whole technology because we believe that that's been something in electric vehicles. Hydrogen is always a controversial thing. It is coming. We will see hydrogen, and we will see hydrogen as a big part of our economies. I'm just not convinced we're going to see a big part of the transport solution because battery technology is evolving quicker than what the hydrogen technology is coming down. Recycling batteries, there's always talk about the fact that it's really hard. It's really hard to recycle lead acid batteries. It's not hard to recycle lithium batteries. So lithium batteries have no dangerous chemicals like the acids inside of the battery. Lithium itself is fairly inert. So actually, it's really easy to recycle the batteries, and the value of lithium is high, so the guys are quite happy to do that as well. And then ultimately, load shedding. There's always a question about, what do we do with load shedding in South Africa? Load shedding doesn't really impact EV drivers simply because they can move the EV somewhere else and charge. And secondly, you can take backup strategies. You can have a generator, you can have various other things. So overall, 1 kilogram of coal will make 1.4 kilowatt hours and will give us 10 kilometers in an electric car. 4 kilograms of coal will make 1 liter of fuel and give us 10 kilometers in a petrol car. So it just goes to show that's why they are more efficient. Overall, there is the perception that people often talk about is to say that, in reality, the fuel cars are also using, or at least electric cars are also using fossil fuels. Well, in actual fact, most of them are using renewables, so really they are clean. And really on the diesel side, the value chain is a lot deeper than what people think. In other words, it's not just about the tailpipe emissions, it's about all of the other emissions along that value chain. So this is the big drivers that are driving where the technology will go. So just to give you a few projections on where the technology is today, you can see the lines in gray are the outlooks that were given over the past few years, and they've always underestimated. So every single year we've underestimated what that projection looks like and where we are. We currently have hit 20% of all new vehicles are electric vehicles. And that's a big milestone. We're going to see a rapid change as that goes forward. So looking at those numbers, looking forward, we're looking at the pivot point in terms of sales. It's not in fleet size, but in sales, we think we'll hit that in about 2026. So by 2026, we should see that 50% of all vehicles sold are across the world. Now, South Africa is a little bit behind, and we need to address that, but we have to be able to follow the world transition of where they're going. So what we've seen is we've seen a squeeze on the oil demand. Firstly, we've seen an efficiency of the existing fossil fuel vehicles, but then we've seen the displacement of the electric vehicles coming into that. And it's a reasonable thing because ultimately energy is easier to produce and manufacture in different places. Just gives you a view, 17 million EVs at the end of last year in worldwide. It's really moved the technology of where it's going to go. So I know it was very quick. I hope it gives you some insight of where the technology is going and the fact that it really is here and it's here to stay.
Going there.
Let's just stop sharing.
Okay. Just stop sharing, please, Winston.
Okay.
There we are. I should be able to. Okay, I'm still not. There. Okay. Winston, thank you very much. Obviously, you're a clear, I wouldn't say a petrol head, you're an EV head. It goes with the great imagine. But I'm pretty sure that there's some interesting questions. And before you disappear, and I know you're going to stay with us for the whole panel, there are some questions in the chat box. So note that, Patrick, thank you. Lynn, Lucas, Darius, in the Q&A session, we'll get to that. Winston does charge by the second, so just be aware of it if you want to engage with him. So thank you very much. Winston, given us some clear direction, I appreciate that. You will obviously not be an infrequent visitor to AFP because we do believe that there's many things that have to be addressed in the way forward. And I think the greatest danger for fleet managers is not knowing what's happening.
Correct.
So thank you for
correct.
that information. And it's not, if I quote you, I think it's not a matter of if you should, it's just when you will do a transition of some sort to another.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Winston. Please hang around, switch on your video, but please do join with us. And we now invite our panel to join with us 6 esteemed members. We have over there Mpho, Gavin, Graham, Bobby, Jonathan, and of course, Rob. So if you'd care to switch on your cameras, please. Mpho, thank you very much for joining us. We are running a separate Miss South Africa beauty pageant here, so clearly none of the others qualify. You are the main sort. Hello, Graham. Hello, Bobby, Jonathan, and Rob, and then Gavin. He's always late to arrive, but considering he's in transport, we'll forgive him this time. So thank you very much for joining us. Folks, the theme of our discussion, and please, let's see it as a conversation. We've got people out there that would like to have answers to questions. Maybe you will address them today, maybe not. And I think the one that we will kick off after I give the theme of our discussion is the insurance industry. So Mpho, prepare yourself. The theme of the discussion is build resilient fleet operations through innovation, compliance, and efficiency. Now, I don't know whether our team did this deliberately or not, but that is ICE. So we're still talking about ICE to a certain extent. And please, if any of the other panel members would like to weigh in, please feel free to do so. Let's not be too controversial because we'll cut you off if you are. So Mpho, what are the practical compliance measures most effectively demonstrate reduced risk from an insurer's point of view? And I just want to lend some context to that. The figures that we have in South Africa at the moment with the motor vehicle insurance varies at the moment from anything from 3.2 to $4.1 billion. And it's estimated to grow to about 9.1 in 2033. So clearly there's money involved in a big scale. So what are the practical compliance measures that you feel we should be looking at?
Thank you, Eugene. It's a great honor to be here and to be a part of this panel. I think from a compliance perspective, there's quite a number of factors that, fleet managers should be looking at. I think we're first going to start with just compliance from a regulatory perspective, right? And that just speaks to regular maintenance and inspections of vehicles, and aligning with the roadworthiness standards that are outlined in the National Road Traffic Act, right? But I think we also need to ensure that vehicles are adequately insured and that they comply with all the road traffic laws, right? Maintaining of driver logs as well to track the driving hours that the drivers are driving to make sure that we comply with the fatigue management, right? Because you don't want your drivers to be on the road for endless amount of hours. They cause a risk to themselves as well as other fellow drivers on the road. And I think just also to speak on leveraging on telematics, right? So there's a lot of data and information that we can get from the telematics space in terms of which areas it is that are no-go areas, as well as supporting any hijacking recovering efforts as well. I think it is just important to just always make sure that you schedule regular maintenance on your vehicles, and make sure that from the driver perspective as well, PDPs are very important, which are called valid professional driving permits. Make sure that if it's applicable to the vehicle that the driver is driving, that they have the correct driver's licenses that they require across all.
So would it be fair to say then that key to the company that's operating the fleet, one of the key components is the fleet manager must be ensuring that all of these things are compliant?
100%. And I think I'm also just going to touch on just from a fire perspective as well, for example, right? So you have to make sure that from a fire and you comply in terms of the parked bus accumulation. So if your buses are parked at a depot, for example, or your trucks are parked at a depot, make sure that there's the correct distance between the buses that are parked. I mean, in case of a fire, you don't want this fire to spread. If it's a big fleet of about 200 plus buses, the buses could burn quite fast if they're too close to each other. Any fire extinguishers that are on the premises. So a good check of the premises is also very important from a compliance perspective as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm not asking you a question, Bobby. I'm just making a statement about your new fire extinguishers. And I'm sure you're going to elaborate further for us. One of the questions, no doubt, and prepare for itself, what about insurance on EV vehicles? That's got to be a question that's going to be tabled. So I think you should prepare yourself. Gavin, before you do your imitation of Piet Welgemoed, what are the compliance issues that you see? Because road freight contributes to about 84% of the transportation of goods in the country. So it's obviously a key component. We've seen a rise in road freight from about 3% and a reduction in rail freight. So what are the compliance issues that you've identified in this massive organization?
Well, thanks, Eugene. Yeah, there's a little bit of debate as to how much road freight is actually done. There's some guys that even quote up to about 88%, but I think if we take 85%, that's probably a fair number. It's worrying because we obviously need rail to carry its load, as the RFA has always said, and hopefully what's happening at the President's Special Council or his crisis committee in terms of dealing with logistics in the country, this is going to be resolved. So hopefully that will be resolved to a certain extent. And then, of course, there's going to be a lot of discussion around how that affects the road freight operations on its own. But compliance is of a major concern. The Road Freight Association has been involved in discussions with the Department of Transport going back to long before I actually was at the Road Freight Association. In actual fact, I was on the other side of the fence at the Department of Transport. And compliance is something that has always been critical. So in the current Road Traffic Act, which is known as the National Road Traffic Act, the Road Freight Association was key in those days with guys by the name of Jack Webster et al. To change what was then called the Road Traffic Act, which was the Act 29 of 89, into the Act today, and to bring into the National Road Traffic Act a chapter called Operator Compliance or Fleet Operators. Okay, Chapter 6 of the Act, and that embodied what in the old days was called RTQS, Road Transport Quality Systems. And in that were the various duties and responsibilities of operators, the managers of the operators, and what they were required to do. So we've got very, very good legislation in terms of what everyone is expected and required to do on a public road, not just trucks and buses, but light motor vehicles as well. The problem is, as always, making sure that everybody plays by the rules. And that you will have heard the RFA speaking about constantly, that there isn't constant law enforcement, management of what is required by the Act or by the provinces, depending on what they require across the country. So compliance is of critical nature, and it isn't only, as the Act refers to it, vehicle fitness, which the average person calls roadworthiness, or driver fitness, the licenses and the competencies of drivers and their supporters, but it's also around how you operate that fleet of yours. And there were various other things brought into play. Auto is one of them, and I'm not going to tell you who was involved with R2 many years ago, otherwise you'll hit me with a plank again. But there are various things that were brought into play to try and bring compliance into the whole operation. And then, of course, we have the huge debacle that the various authorities who need to do certain things, and I'm not going to talk about that at length, but like licensing and roadworthying and those sorts of things are not even doing what they need to do. And trying to get a license right now is really a big problem. So
Gavin,
compliance and conformance is very, very important.
Ask you to talk to one of the issues that you've discussed prolifically about contractor versus employee and the basis on which drivers are remunerated. And that, of course, brings into account where the fleet manager, the role they play. Can you just reflect on that? And I want to go to Graham. Graham, you've come from a background where you've been in the automotive industry for an extended period of time. I would just like to ask you, given the fact that we see Chinese growth sales having moved from 9% a little while ago to 13%, it's currently 9% of vehicle sales are Chinese, and there's 13 different manufacturers, 34 different models, which I think has grown. The question to you from an OEM perspective, what is your view, or what is the view that they would have on fleet management or the evolution of it and what role they play?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Hi again. It's obviously quite a substantial one from a fleet point of view, because while the Chinese vehicles have been very well accepted in the market, and I believe the primary driver here has been affordability, the Chinese vehicles, they essentially got their act together as an industry and in terms of the product they're producing at about the same time that South Africans are coming under a lot of financial pressure. So we had this almost perfect storm. In South Africa, we had a buy down in the market. We had some of the luxury brands actually losing something like 80% of their sales volume over a 10-year period. And the Chinese, at the same time, their industry has matured, their products have improved dramatically, and they've taken the lead in electric cars as well. And they are now hungry for export markets, and South Africa became the perfect the target market for them. And so we've seen, and I understand the figures, to correct you, Eugene, it's closer to nearly 28 or 30 brands that are here already. I think every other day we open up in our mail and we see there's another Chinese brand that has arrived. I think what it means for everybody on the fleet side is very clearly we're going to be looking at having to consider these cars through cost pressures and looking at new relationships. And I think many fleet operators have been very comfortable with a relationship with a particular supplier probably for many, many years. And you're now going to be breaking away out of that comfort zone and forced to reassess the new supplier right from bare bones basics. Yes, they're competitive from a price point of view, but is it just offering a good price to crack a sale? Or are they really committed to the fleet business and going to back that price up with the sort of support levels you've been enjoying from your current legacy manufacturer that's been in this country for 50 years? Do they understand what they need to do to support your needs? Are they going to commit the resources to doing that, etc.? So I think that's a very big one. I don't think they can be ignored. I think they're certainly going to be here. They've got to be considered, but I think you've got to go and approach it really carefully and assess right from the basics of it.
Thank you for that insight, Graham. And I think also we've seen the closing by 3 leading OEMs of various dealerships for whatever reason. Maybe later you can comment on that. But if I can move to where's Bobby over there? Key to any successful operation or any business is health and safety. Now, I think, and one of the panelists that we've highlighted earlier is an expert on mental health. And I think he has a figure that I think 25% of South Africa's workforce was diagnosed as suffering from some form of depression or other. So now we talk about mental health. But what I found shocking, and I don't know if you've got any information on it, but only about 15 to 25% of those who were diagnosed felt comfortable asking for help. So we're sitting with a bunch of people, and if we think drivers, fleet managers, what's your take on the sustainability of safety cultures, because that's what it's really about, in the fleet market and in the operating sphere?
Hey, Eugene, thanks for having me. Yeah, safety cultures, if you look at the climate currently in the macroeconomic environment, if you look at around you, I think we can all agree that we're operating in very, very challenging situations. If you look at the road infrastructure and service delivery and all those kind of things, there's a lot to complain about, and that has a direct impact on your safety climate in the workplace. But I think more to that, as we move in this age, I think as your earlier guest has alluded to an age where we need to embrace technology, we tend to sort of eliminate the human side of it as well, and that has an impact on safety cultures within your organizations, as we tend to focus on all of these technologies and systems to make things easier, and to really focus on the data side, but we tend to forget the human factor around it. So if you look at the human factor alone, just in terms of the road freight sector, which contributes, and I think Gavin would know, approximately 4.5% to the GDP in South Africa. The cost of incidents is valued at around 164 billion rand a year. And to break that even down, to just sort of comprehend that number, that is, if you look at the train system, you can build approximately 6 of them with that amount of money, or you can pay the entire police service salaries for 20 or 18 months with that amount of money. So it has a significant impact on the economy, road crashes. And if you look at that, I can confidently say from studies that has been conducted in the industry that approximately 75 to 80% of those incidents are caused directly as a result of human factors. So the challenge that we're sitting with in road freight specifically is that you're sitting with what we call a driver of a truck, which is also classified as a lone worker. So a lone worker carries a specific risk that when he travels 300 to 500 kilometers away from a depot where there's direct supervision, you rely on that specific individual to make certain decisions in line with your policy and your risk profile and controls that you've put in place. And that always becomes a challenge when you have people classified as lone workers, and you need to cater for that risk. The only way that, well, I'm confident in how to address that is if you really focus on improving your safety culture in organizations.
Thanks, Bobby. And I think that too often we forget that Mpho mentioned about fatigue, one of the factors that contribute toward crashes. So if we can move to Jonathan. Jonathan, freight and logistics, total value of $23 billion is projected to have a growth rate of 6%. So you in that space, you're an expert on it currently. Maybe just very briefly tell the audience what role your current role is, because it's actually quite exciting in my mind. Jonathan, over to you. I can't hear you. Okay, Jonathan, while you sort your sound out, Rob, if we can move to you, please. We know that you work in the construction industry. It's projected growth rate of 3% from 24 to 28. You're in the construction, you're with AfriSam, you have those funny things that work while the driver is on the road. Give us some of the practical approaches that fleets such as yours should look with regard to innovation and the like.
Thanks, Eugene, and welcome everybody, and thank you. Eugene, yeah, look, the ready-mix industry it's a unique vehicle. You are operating with a vehicle that is a top-heavy vehicle. You're also operating with a live load as the concrete moves from the front of the drum to the back of the drum as you drive, as well as going on around the sides, and the drum is rotating. So what you've got to watch with these type of vehicles is when going around sort of a left-hand corner and the drum is turning left, your driver's got to be aware of these challenges. And the whole thing is that you've got a 2-hour shelf life of your product before it starts to go hard, becomes concrete. So the challenges we do face is obviously making sure our drivers are trained and the vehicles are roadworthy and up to spec to make sure that we are delivering our products safely. And with them being top heavy vehicles, also your site conditions, making sure that we're checking our site conditions before we enter in the site. Very easily that truck will go over if you're not watching your banks, a lot of your sites, especially where there's deep excavations and that, when they're starting the parking areas and that, you've got to stand away from the bank because of your weight that you carry, that you can go down the bank very easily.
Would it be fair to say, Rob, that your fleet manager has to understand the dynamics of the concrete industry or the product that you're transporting in order to be able to deliver efficiently?
Absolutely. It's key. You know, you can't bring somebody from any other industry straight away to walk into this industry. It comes with years of experience. You know, you've got to have a look and make sure that you know and understand everything that works around concrete. You know, the other thing is your consistency of your concrete. You can have a dry mix with one load and a very wet mix with the next load. And having to understand that depending on what your clients have requested, whether you concrete, if you're pumping it or whether you're pouring it into a foundation. So you've got to know your industry and you've got to know your product. It's very
Thanks.
important.
Now, Rob, now you know why we've got you on our panel, because in the construction industry, you must be somewhat of an expert, I imagine. So thank you. Jonathan, I trust your volume is working. So in addition to giving us your background, talk to us about developing KPIs that make a meaningful difference or meaningful improvements in fleet performance. Still not hearing you, Jonathan. Okay, so while you sort that out, maybe you just want to log off and come back on again. Gavin, can I talk to you about those compliance issues about remuneration, please?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I was just wondering, maybe you've muted everyone. So yeah, one of the very, very big issues in the freight industry is around the remuneration of employees. Now, the Road Freight Association is the largest employer in the sector. It is part of the National Bargaining Council for the road freight and logistics industry. And it has spent many years ensuring that decent wages are paid. Now, there are always concerns that the wages are too high. And for a number of years, there have been a number of concerns around the increases in wages. But you need to offset that with a couple of things. The first is obviously in terms of the peace in the industry. So the RFA has ensured that we've had 15 years of peace. We have not had industrial action and strikes in the industry. Now, I know a lot of other things have happened in the country, like those June 21 strikes. So that kind of fades from memory. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we've developed good developmental programs, training programs, support programs for our employees, and that costs money. And a fair amount of that money is paid by the employer through to the council, and the council then funds a fair amount of that training, as well as through their subsidies and levies to TETA. But what happens is that there are a fair amount of operators who choose not to abide by the law and to employ other employees. And generally, the largest scapegoat are these foreign nationals. So they don't necessarily only come from Zimbabwe. They come from all over the place. They could even come from America. We might get 49 of them. But they employ non-registered illegal foreigners and then pay them way below the minimum wage. So if I just take a round figure and say the basic wage for a truck driver in South Africa is 10,000 Rand, it's not, it's different. It's 10,000 Rand. They then go and pay these sorts of employees 3,000 Rand. Now, you and I both know what that means in terms of survivability. That brings into the whole labor process both dissatisfaction, unrest. There are South African citizens who lose their jobs because it is far cheaper to pay these other individuals. And then what happens is you have this chain effect, and that's what we're trying to get across to the Department of Transport especially, is that then to make sure you make ends meet, you start to cut expenses. And what are the expenses that you cut? And they are the so-called soft things. It's going to be maintenance. I'll push my tires for another couple of 100,000 kilos. I will only look at the shocks later. I will perhaps start using mixed fuels. Mixed fuels is a ghost that very few people talk about. There are guys running there with, I think, 50% water, 50% something else, and the last 10% might be a smell of a diesel rag. And that, of course, brings problems in terms of your engine survivability. So making sure that everybody plays on a level playing field. You pay the right wages, you pay the right fees for everything, will bring stability into the whole scenario.
Thanks, Gavin. And if we get the opportunity, I'd like us to just talk about those guys who pay per load, etc. But Mpho, if I can get back to you, the quote I gave you from the Global Fleet Director at Ashplund was data being important. So if I look at the third topic that I highlighted for you, how can fleet managers and operators leverage insurance data to build more resilient operations?
So I think I'll just start by touching from a claims perspective, right? And I think it's important to just get that data from us as insurers regarding the claim side of insurance, right? I mean, there's a wealth of information that fleet managers can take from the insurers in terms of claims. And this doesn't only speak to their business, but also speaks to other business areas as well, right? And I think number one, high risk zones, right? And that's sort of the data that you can get from an insurer in terms of accident hotspots, in terms of any theft prone areas, and that's sort of the data that we can provide as insurers, right? But I think it's also important for us to highlight that we are also able to provide you with any accident trends, right? So any historical data that we have about where claims are because of specific routes that were taken, the time of day perhaps that most accidents happen, but also driver behavior, right? And so accidents that are caused mostly by the insured drivers, I think it is important. I touched a bit on that on driver training. That is important to then get that data from insurer on how driver behavior actually impacts their loss ratio as well as just their general claims data. And I think also there's certain data that we can provide in terms of vehicles, the type of vehicles that are high risk vehicles. I think in South Africa, of course, you have your VW Polos, your Hiluxes that are high risk, your Fortuners, for example, that are labeled as, let me not say high risk, they're labeled or regarded as high risk vehicles, from a theft and hijack perspective. I think from a Polo as well, driver behavior also comes into there as well from the driver patterns that we see in that perspective, And I think the use of telematics and the data is very, very, very important, to spot risky behaviors as well, such as speeding, if there's any harsh braking that is happening on the fleet, or if the drivers aren't following the right distance, between the vehicles if they're parked in traffic. So if there's a lot of rear end where their drivers are rear ending a lot of third parties, that's something to be aware of as I think an insured or as a fleet manager.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to go to Graham next because I just want to talk about vehicle technology. But figure I had quoted a while ago on the N1, the old Winstone, 84% of crashes were as a result of rear-end collisions. And what you're talking about is incorrect following distance. And that is why you need to go to master driving. See, they teach you how to do those things. Graham, future technologies. We talk about adaptive cruise control, lane departure assist. How do you see the implementation of those, or the role that they can play in making a fleet more efficient and make the fleet managers' role easier and better?
Yeah, well, if you look right now, I think you've got vast improvements in telematics and advances in the telematics technology. So I think fleet managers can now be in a position to actually understand what's really going wrong out there, how their vehicles are being driven, etc. Now, I think what is happening with vehicle technology is that there are a lot of features that have now been incorporated into vehicles, which with the focus, I think, let's get back to safety features, it was always around impact safety. And if we looked at the 5-star rating systems, etc., as I say, focus very much on impact safety. It's now moved in Europe because the entire aspect of the industry has matured to the extent that they're now looking at accident avoidance. So the emphasis now is that we've kind of done what we can with regard to the body structure, airbags, etc. Let's now look at avoidance. And we're all aware of the old ASC or anti-skid control, which has been with us for probably 10 years and is virtually mandatory in order to get even a basic score on an NCAP test these days. But it has expanded so much into city braking, where you have automatic braking at lower speeds, etc. We have the high speed, we have lane keeping control. We have all of those features coming in now, which are becoming more and more, shall we say, standardized. The sad news is that is being driven by manufacturers responding to published NCAP results, not being driven by our local legislation. Our legislation with regard to safety is extremely basic. We sit around a level of about Euro 2, which requires that you need a seatbelt and very little else. You even have one or two buggies and cars up until a year or so ago that were not offering ABS. I mean, to me, those are basic. And legislation has not been helping the driving of this technology adoption. It's come through NCAP, which, as NCAP freely admits, is peer pressure. They publicize their results. Customers see the results. Other manufacturers see them. They look at customer reaction. They're obviously doing research. They're monitoring what's going on, and they are responding accordingly. So I think this will continue, but unfortunately, there's always a cost. And manufacturers will react to customers' willingness to pay. And that's it. I mean, the technology is there. Very high-end cars in this country have it already. Low-end cars have very little. So I think the drive could complete owners. If they see the benefits and they are big enough and they get together, they can push manufacturers, responsible companies. It exists and it's in other countries already.
I think everybody's familiar with the tests that the AA have done over the period of years in conjunction with Bloomberg Foundation, where South African vehicles manufactured were sent abroad for testing for Euro NCAP. And I think the general consensus was very few, measured up to vehicles that are sold in first world countries. It's almost as if the quality of life in Africa, when South Africa is of lesser value. And I think from a health and safety point of view, it's clearly an issue that we have to deal with. And this, of course, would apply to the selection of vehicles for one fleet. I see Jonathan is back with us now. So, Jonathan, I trust that we're going to hear you this time. So just recall I asked just to give a background of where you are now, and then let's discuss that in the context of looking at how important KPIs can produce meaningful improvements in the management of a fleet.
Oh, 100%. Can you guys hear me now? Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Eugene. So my name is Jonathan Mphake. I'm the National Fleet Manager for SPV Services. That is the cash in transit company. We distribute cash all over South Africa in rural areas, in urban areas, and we distribute cash from the South African Reserve Bank as well. So dovetailing into KPIs that are fundamental for fleet management and driver behavior, as Mpho mentioned, a lot of it is really looking at the telemetry. A lot of companies and fleet managers look at telemetry as if it's just tracking, but understanding the data that is inside there to gain insights that will help you change the behavior. And this is a holistic approach. So you have to understand from a driver management perspective, what is those driver behavior trends that you get out of telemetry. Also, there is video telemetry for some of the fleets. And if you look at those in combination, it gives you almost a driver DNA. Then you have to move to the next step of, if I rack status my drivers, how do I engage Eugene and the team from Master Drive, for example, for driver training that is specific to the needs of that driver, in essence, creating proper road safety. So I would say from a vehicle perspective, we know about total cost of ownership and cents per kilometer as a good measure to see, is the vehicle performing? And dovetailing into that, we understand the scoring that's available in telemetry to understand the driver insights, and you combine the two, it gives you a very well-managed fleet from a cost perspective, a management perspective, safety perspective, and also insurance mitigation perspective as well. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you for that insight. I know that I would like to have one of your vans drop off your payment to me. I don't think it's going to happen in the short term. And Paul, maybe we can go back to you. If you feel comfortable answering that question on EVs and insurance, because I'm sure there's been some questions there.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I think from an insurance perspective, in South Africa particularly, there's still a lot of work to be done, right? And I think from a wording perspective, first of all, I mean, there's of course certain changes or updates that need to be done on our wordings to make sure that we are actually covering EVs the way that they need to be covered, right? But we also need to factor in certain exclusions that might be applicable from an insurance perspective when it comes to EVs, so there is a lot of work that has to be done from an underwriting perspective, but there is also a lot of work to be done from a claims perspective as well, right? And I think also just from when you look at the resources that we have in this country in terms of repairers, in terms of repair time, downtime as well, when it does come to EVs, I mean, we don't have a lot of specialists right now at the moment in the market from a claims perspective who know how to look or attend to claims from an EV perspective, right? And that also speaks to just general mechanical breakdown. I mean, if an EV breaks down in the middle of nowhere, and I think just to touch to Winstone's presentation earlier, where he was showing where these parking bays are at the moment in the country, it's not like a vehicle that you can go and just charge it in the middle of nowhere. You actually need to take this vehicle to where there is a place where it can get charged, So there is also a lot of work that needs to be done with our roadside assistance programs that we have and with those partners as well. So I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and we have started doing in the work. We have started putting in the work, and also just from a driver perspective as well, training these drivers to make sure that if the fleet is going to be changed completely from an ICE fleet into an EV fleet, are the drivers trained well enough to know how to drive an EV, and not just assume that just because they've been driving and they have the experience of driving ICE vehicles all around, that they'll automatically know what to do when they get behind an EV truck or a bus, for example,
To see a driver lift off his foot off a light motor vehicle and the vehicle suddenly come to a stop, it's a bit of a shock to the person following. Gavin, maybe just before I ask you the question, and we'll take almost like a final wrap up around questions, the future trends in road freight, how that will affect fleet managers. But just before you comment on that, do you happen to know how many electric or EV ECs are on the market or on the road at the moment?
In terms of South Africa?
Yeah.
I don't have that right here with me, Eugene. We could get that figure, but I don't know that.
Okay, I understand there's 1 or 2 Volvos or something like that. That's why I asked the question. So talk to us about the future trends in road freight that are going to impact on fleet managers.
Well, I think there are a number of trends that are going to impact. And one of the very first things is the change in energy. So, electric vehicles aren't the only vehicles that are out there. Earlier on, there was reference to hydrogen, and you would have seen in the last 6 months 3 different types of engines that purportedly use something else other than hydrogen. Some of it is water, have been developed both in Germany, in Sweden, I think, and in Japan. So definitely the very first thing that is going to be of critical priority to operators is their power source, whether that's diesel or electric or hydrogen or whatever the case may be. Secondly, it's going to be the support systems. So, for example, there are diesel engines running now, Euro 6s that are coming in. We've heard about the development of the Euro 7 that require various support systems, whether it's AdBlue or whether it's maintenance types of systems that we currently don't have. Not that the European countries have all of that in place either. They do have AdBlue in place, and it's quite freely available. So that would be the next thing, is how we would, if we decided, when I say we, if the government of the day, this is not a royal we, if the government of the day decided to go for something like, okay, we're no longer going to allow anything less than a Euro 5 or a Euro 6, I'm just picking levels, please. Then how are we going to support that? Because that's the critical question. How are we going to support and ensure that the biofuels industry, for example, is able to deliver what it needs? Secondly, many operators run warehouses, and the warehouses have 2 distinct challenges. The first is electricity supply. And how do you deal with that? And warehouses that have perishable goods, in other words, refrigeration, or have any sort of system that requires a constant electricity supply. So firefighting systems, for example, require constant electricity. Security systems, your systems relating to managing stock and how that is dispersed to retailers, etc., etc. So those facilities require a different energy source. And then water. Water is incredibly important. So what do we do with water in the road trade industry? Well, believe it or not, we spend thousands of liters of water washing vehicles. So there's a whole system and process now going to waterless vehicle washing. And it isn't only the external of the vehicle, it's those internal cargo areas which carry perishable goods or any other sort of goods which you want clean. So those probably are the first 3 very important focuses for the sector. Then security. It's of critical importance. These days, we've seen that gangs are actually hitting the DCs, the distribution centers. They're no longer hitting the trucks because they can go to the DC center and get all the cargo there. They don't have to worry for 10 trucks to come past them. Tires. Tires went up by 42% a year and a half ago. So the technology in tires is changing in how we know tires. And then, of course, the human factor, how we deal with that ghost that you cannot see immediately called fatigue, how we deal with attitudes on the roads, how we deal with scheduling, which then makes our trips shorter and our use of fuels less. So, Eugene, those are all really there. And then bring into this mix the challenges coming from overseas. Now, you spoke about Chinese vehicles. I saw a figure a couple of months ago, and I can't find it again, but it was a figure that shocked me, that something like 41% of commercial vehicle sales in South Africa in 2024 were Chinese. Now, I'm trying to find that stat again, because that tells you what's happening. It tells you about the types of technology that's coming in, and these Chinese vehicles come in with all the bells and whistles, and it requires those sorts of new systems to actually look after them. So yeah, that's really what our short term looks like.
Thanks, Gavin. When you find that figure, why don't you share it with us, and we'll share it with on our platform, because I think that's of note. Bobby, just talk to you, please. One of the things I had down for you is, how do you balance aspects of fleet management with regard to safety and sustainability with environmental responsibility? Maybe you'd like to share that with us. And by the way, Patrick, just as your Winston's comment about the number of EVs, are they correct? Maybe you'd like to put a note in the chat box. Bobby, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. I think it all comes down again to safety culture and investing in your people. You can have the most wonderful systems in place, but if you do not invest in the competency, skills, and training in the people who actually manages those systems, you will eventually lose the efficacy of that particular system. In terms of balancing, I think South Africa is in a very unique situation. Our transport industry, and I think a lot of the panelists can agree with me, we operate on very tight margins, and that affects the decisions at the end of the day in terms of how we invest in health and safety and environment. But I think it's a matter of seeing the bigger picture and how health and safety can actually benefit the business on the long run, and can actually have a quite a positive effect on your ROI. So if we speak about the financial benefit of having sound health and safety systems in the business, investing in your safety culture, competency and training and skills of your people is definitely the way to go in terms of capacity building. And then combine that with the digitalization drive, having sound systems in place that that goes along with you investing in this the skills and understanding of what your desired outcome is. So I think in a nutshell, balancing investing in your safety culture, but also looking at digitalization of the business, making it easier, freeing up resources to get to the front lines.
Thanks, Bobby. Maybe in your wrap-up, you just share with us that new fire extinguisher you got that's environmentally friendly. And by the way, you've seen our CSI partner here is the Rose Foundation. They pick up all that old oil. And yes, something that if you didn't know, 1 liter of used oil can pollute 1 million liters of water. So environmental responsibility is key to survival as well. Rob, question for you. How do we, or what are the factors that an organization such as you should take into account? We've seen your off-site operations. They've got these massive towers loading concrete. What integration needs to be understood by fleet managers in running a fleet such as yours?
Thank you, Eugene. Yeah. I think the big part of ours, most of our fleet is cartridge contracted. So the integration between ourselves and our cartridge contractor is very important. And understanding the needs of the market. The construction industry is one that the market goes up and down. And to ensure that you, as a fleet manager, I need to ensure before contracting with any new trucks and that I've got work for them.
Yeah.
And also understanding that how many trucks will I require for a period of time to deliver to a particular construction site. Whether we're currently be very busy with highway projects and they're down in Durban, they eat trucks. And looking at your long-term goals and then also matching that with your clients' needs. I think the biggest focus in the construction industry on the transport side is knowing what our clients' needs are and integrating our systems with our clients and making sure that we match it and taking back into the shelf life of our concrete as well.
Yeah, thanks.
And having a look at all of those.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to field one last question to Jonathan, and then we'll do a quick wrap up with everybody. Operational excellence strategies. What suggestions do you have for totally different fleets? You've come from a background from heavy to now you've got heavy but small. What are your recommendations?
Eugene, I think the recommendations really is understanding the fleet in totality end to end. It is not software that will solve all the issues. That's what I discovered, whether I was at Dulux or at Castrol, with Imperial, which is DP World now, is understanding what we have to do from a customer centricity perspective, building KPIs that are not inwardly focused only, but also look at the customer as the end user, and then designing a fleet that is configured rather to execute that. And there's a premise I always love: people, process, and technology. If the people are changed, managed in the right manner to understand the processes, they will understand that the technology augments them and it's not a stumbling block to them. So that's what I've really seen, Eugene, is talking to the drivers and not at the drivers, humanizing them, thinking about them in totality from a human and wellness perspective and a mental perspective, and letting them know, and everyone else, the fleet managers, the fleet supervisors, the logistics managers, everyone involved, the why we're doing what we're doing. And the shared vision allows that collaboration that leads to excellence. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, don't go away, everybody. There's lucky prize draws at the end over there. One is a lunch date with Gavin, and second prize is 3 lunch dates with Gavin. So Gavin, be on your best behavior. Let's just do a quick wrap up. Your parting words in this context, and maybe you'd just like to include a comment on why this body that's been formed, an association to look after the interests of fleet professionals, is so important. And Paul, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think, it was Rob who touched on experience, the experience of drivers and how important it is for drivers to be experienced in the area that the type of vehicle that they're driving in. And Gavin touched on remuneration, and to speak on what Jonathan just said about having to look at it holistically. I think from an insurer perspective, the dream sort of client that you'd want to have on your books is one that cares not only about themselves as making a profit, but they care about their employees, the drivers, the whole employees in their employ. They care about their fleet, so they care about their vehicles and maintaining their vehicles and making sure that these vehicles are in good working order, that the drivers are driving good, well-maintained vehicles, right? And also the impact that has on the whole community as well, right? So, I mean, if we have better drivers on the road, it's better for all of us, because that means less accidents, less fatalities as well. So it's a wide impact that it has on the larger society as a whole. So I think it's very important to have these sort of platforms where we can share and we can highlight just how important it is to look after the people, and also look after South Africa as well, and how it's all a ripple effect, and how the collaboration helps for us to just have just a better society overall as fleet professionals.
Thank you very much. Just before we move to Gavin, the number of inquiries that we have had for membership to this body by telematics providers is quite substantial. They see the people who will be here as a source of being able to be sold to, and that's clearly not the intention. We want to be providers of excellent information and reliable data. Gavin, in 2 words or less, your wrap-up message.
Oh, thanks, Eugene. I must be quite honest, is that I don't fully understand what you want to achieve. This very much copies the RFA, and I think we need to have a discussion around that at another time. Everything that I saw in the membership benefits is basically a carbon copy of the RFA, and the RFA has been doing this for 50 years. So I think we need to have a discussion around that. Thanks.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Ours is closely copied on the one in the UK, Association of Fleet Professionals. And as it expands, you'll see that there's significant differences in addition to what RFA operate. By the way, and we're members of RFA. Graham, closing comments?
Yes, well, sitting on the OEM side, so to speak, retired, I really can't add too much to. I think Mpho put it perfectly. I mean, I could never have summed it up better than you did, Mpho. Thank you. But I would really, from my side, I would look forward to being able to contribute with my knowledge and background in terms of what you're trying to achieve. I believe I would be able to make some sort of contribution. If I can add one last comment, I don't know if it's appropriate now. You wanted to make a comment about dealership clothing. Can I go
Please,
that now?
please.
Yes,
please do so.
I think, to be honest, a couple of manufacturers have been given a bit of a bum rap, so to speak, in the press. I think it's been sensational reporting. They're jumping in to manufacturers responding to the change in the market, the structure of the market, and various people's market share, etc. And they're simply downsizing some of their network, which is understandable. But what's never reported is that many Chinese manufacturers have come in. I think the bigger ones are running at between 50 and 70 dealers. You don't get equivalent newspaper reporting to say, well, there's 50 new dealers with job opportunities, etc. And I honestly think that most of those 50 or 70 dealers in some Chinese cases have been without one greenfield site. You have existing facilities which are now being converted, and from a dedicated brand, they're being because that one brand can no longer support the overhead cost of a large site like that. So they are being split. That's becoming the norm. And likewise, when you have genuine shrinkage of a particular brand's network, they've been stepping into those gaps too. So I think that side of it is a lot healthier than certain newspaper reports would have one.
Thank you very much, Graham. And just talking to, maybe it covers Gavin's point as well, the light motor vehicle industry by way of fleets is not really well represented. And the information that we got as a result of our Fleet Safety Awards spoke to the needs that they have as individuals. So, Gavin, clearly there's room for cooperation, and just having you present with us makes me very happy. Jonathan, your closing message, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the opportunity as well. And I think the fleet manager that understands that fleet management is a science, is a fleet manager that will help ensure road safety in South Africa. If we look at load optimization, driver wellness, vehicle maintenance, productivity and training, and we understand the science of fleet management, it will be incumbent upon all of us to make sure we do our difference, not just to get our drivers home safely, but to get everyone else home safely. And as we partner together to make sure South African roads are safe, we will happily help the people we don't see when the crashes happen. My dad was a truck driver for plus 40 years. And I remember him being in a couple of crashes. And I remember waiting at home with my sister for him to come back home safe. And the reason why I have this passion for this industry is that I want to contribute to other Jonathans and Mapulas who are waiting for their fathers and mothers to come back home safe. Thank you so much, sir.
Good emotive issue. Thank you. Comment there. Rob, and then we'll finish off with Bobby after that. Rob, please.
Thanks, Eugene, and thanks to everybody. I couldn't say it better than Jonathan did, as well as Mpho. This is about safety. This is about ensuring that our trucks are maintained correctly, are on the road. We are all from different backgrounds, but every single one of us in this panel have touched on safety, the importance of it, and the importance of making sure that our drivers and people around us, when we go over on the road, we cause huge accidents. So ensuring that we've got the right telematics so we can check what happened, and learning from accidents and learning from what has happened, I think is critical for me. And I'm hoping that this forum will bring like-minded transporters together from different environments, but having the focus in the same, which is safety, driver wellness, and making sure that we move the products that we have to move. And I agree with Gavin. Transnet does need to start playing their role in this by moving masses of stuff where they can. But until that's going to happen, us as transporters need to ensure that we keep the roads safe and we keep the products moving where they've got to move to. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And let's not forget those idiot drivers, and I'm quite blunt in saying it, who cut in front of your concrete mixer with the agitator and causing them to take evasive action, which results in it rolling. And who do they blame? The driver. Okay. So clearly that's one of our mandates. Bobby, this is in fact, and one of the reasons why you're here, I think, is because safety is critical. And that's how our Fleet Safety Award started, and it has given rise to this. So closing message, please.
Yes, thanks, Eugene. I think first of all, congratulations on launching the first inaugural AFP Colloquium. It's absolutely a privilege to be part of the panel. I think this is a brilliant initiative. I think this is something that is so much needed, especially in this industry. I mean, Jonathan was alluding to a personal experience with an incident that he had. I was just paging through some stats yesterday and the day before, and I was looking at, what is the real impact of a road accident, in terms of lives. And interestingly, the WHO has done a bit of a study, and they reckon that the rule of thumb is for every person that dies in a crash, about 20 people are directly impacted as a result of that fatal accident. And I can actually allude to an incident that I was personally involved with, leading the investigation, where we actually did a desktop exercise, and we calculated that for the driver's life that was lost in a rollover, it happened a few years ago near Secunda, almost 100 people were affected in some way or form as a result of that crash. So if you look at the stats, I mean, the stats are there. If you look at the impact, I spoke about the financial impact to the economy, any form and method we can bring in to curb that trend, and to save even a single life would be worth it. So I welcome this AFP, and yeah, we are there to serve the industry.
Thank you very much. With that note, I'd like to thank all the panelists, Bobby, Rob, Graham, Gavin, and Jonathan, and Mpho, for your participation. Please don't go away. I've got some, as you shut off your cameras, I've got some questions that you may be able to answer. So again, thank you for participating. And please remember that one of the things that we've identified is that we need to upskill the fleet manager with more things that enables him to do his job properly. So we now move to Q&A. So thank you very much, guys, for being there. And the first question is from Lynn Nell. How does one overcome the increased tax on company car perks? I'm not sure if anybody is wanting or is able to answer that. Second one is from Melina. What cybersecurity risks do EVs pose? Winston, maybe you want to handle that. And then wouldn't it be ideal to focus on mental and physical health of the driver? Bobby, maybe you want to address that.
Eugene, can you please just repeat the question if possible?
So what are you doing? How much money are you going to give to people? No, only kidding. The question is, wouldn't it be ideal to focus on mental and physical health of the driver? I think it is, but maybe you'd like to share what is being done and what can be done. And Winston, we'll come to you next.
Yeah, so Eugene, I think it all starts, I think we spoke about it earlier about, investing in the competency of your staff. I think as organizations in the industry, we spend a lot of time and resources in investing in upskilling our drivers. I think a critical component as well is that controller sitting in the control room as well. If you think about it, everything evolves around that particular function. If we can upskill that specific function to also focus on emotional intelligence and how to handle a driver, we can reduce a lot of these mental issues in the workplace. Then there's also, if you look at some of these larger organizations, there's a lot of employee assistance programs like, I know it was known as ICAS before, name change, I failed to remember the new name, but there are certain programs available to support employees in this particular space. But wellness, mental wellness, also being in Mental Wellness Month this month, is an absolute critical component in curbing and managing a sustainable health and safety program at work. So it's becoming more and more of a focus point in workplaces. And I think it's really worth investing into the mental health of your employees.
Thank you very much. And we'll be with you now, Winston. Just one of the things, the key objectives that we established is that we would like to be, AFP, to be a source of information that doesn't necessarily cost individuals, drivers, fleet managers, and the like. There is a free version that would be made available to people from Vimbo Health because of the stigma that's associated with somebody going to their boss and saying, I feel depressed. They may feel that their job is in jeopardy. So clearly that is one of the issues that we want to talk to, and we will be. So Winston, cybersecurity risks?
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think firstly, any modern vehicle has got really state-of-the-art technology inside. I mean, it's SSL certificates. It's the same level of security that you would have on servers. Now, yeah, it can be, is there a way to compromise? Without doubt, there will be. But what a lot of the vehicle technologies do is they don't even expose vehicle control stuff remotely. So there's no, even if you could hack into the connection, because, and by the way, most of those hacks would be because somebody shared their password or somebody discovered your password. But so from a security perspective, absolutely state-of-the-art SSL certificates, but at the same time, with the layers they put in, they would just prevent vehicle control, for example, as a remote capability.
Okay, thank you, Winston. I know it's probably a lot more technical than that. And I know people watch movies and they watch how this can happen with the president's limo. We won't comment on that now. But I think that there are opportunities that in the course of events, we'll be able to share more information with individuals. So that brings to conclusion. Lynn, maybe somebody, a tax expert, is going to talk to you. But we now need to move on to our next steps for AFP. And we're just going to put up 2 events that will be taking place in the near future. So upcoming events, NEV Fleet Workshop. It'll be a combination of both an in-person and hybrid. The reason why we would like to do that is because some people would like to engage individually, and we have got some partners who will work with us on that. And the reason why we're talking to NEVs is new energy vehicles. Winston spoke about hydrogen and the challenges. Gavin mentioned a few things, but it is a topic that people would like to know about. We've got our industry experts lined up for that, and we'll be treating that not just as a 2-hour session, but as, well, let's call it a day workshop with breakaway panels. So anybody interested, if you're a member, you'll be able to join. And then, of course, we will be introducing our AFP annual AGM, which will take place in Transport Month in October. It will be closely aligned with our Fleet Safety Awards, and that is something that we will talk about in a moment. So please can I ask you to bear with us as we just put up the next reveal. So we're using this as an opportunity to launch our 2025 Fleet Safety Awards. As you know, this is its 4th year running. And if I can just share with you some of the stats that we've had over the years. Year 1, 110 entries. Year 2, 250. Year 3 was 314. This year, we set the ambitious target at 500 entries. So the reason why we believe that we can be so audacious and so have such expectation is that we'll be giving away 250,000 Rand in cash. This is your Master Drive initiative. The entries open today. That we will show you on the next slide. But just at the bottom, you will notice Best Fleet Manager. Last year, they walked away with just under 70,000 Rand in cash. We want to recognize the best organization. They will benefit from the Philip Hull Road Safety Steering Award. That is a floating trophy. The Road Warrior is for a driver that reflects the values that are associated with somebody who's on our roads and who uses that as an opportunity to make a difference. And then, of course, the others are there, but sustainability and the Fleet Sustainability Innovation Award. We're looking to people, and clearly we would see EVs as one of the areas. The move and the transition to that is critical to the growth of the fleet industry. How do you enter? As you look at the next page, by the way, we're just waiting for the names of those who are prize winners. Please, there's the QR code. If you'd like to grab your cell phone and scan it, you will be able to start the process that enable you to sign up, sign in, and participate. Please remember there's different categories. The Saboa Fleet Safety Awards is also included. That's for the bus industry. And we sincerely hope that we will see greater participation this year. The process has been simplified somewhat from the initial where there was a 2-phase one. You now will be able to register, get your login and complete it at stage 1. So we look forward to many, many entries. And that will be an opportunity for us to give away some money. But above all, recognition for those who have done an excellent job of wanting to contribute toward fleet safety And we see AFP as an integral component to making sure that we can equip individuals with the skills needed. So with that, we're just waiting for the names of the prize winners. But whilst we're just waiting for those, I'd like to give special recognition to the Rose Foundation, because that's an organization, as I indicated to you, gives us prevents the misuse of used oil, which would impact negatively on our environment. Just so that you're also aware, if you have a look at the tire industry, Gavin mentioned key component of tires, I think it was. If you don't know what tire wear particles are, those are the particles that come off our tires as we drive on the road. And I think worldwide, the latest figure is something in the region of about 1.5 million tons of tire wear particles find their ways into our ocean. We'd also at this moment like to thank the individuals or the organizations that have made it possible or give us giveaway prizes. And the one that I'd like to mention first is aware.org. As you are aware, they're an organization that controls the ad industry or the adverts that are put out there on behalf of the liquor industry, who are very active and in fact proactive with regard to creating awareness about the dangers of drinking and driving. Drinking and driving contributes to a significant number of deaths on our road, and we want to be able to do everything we possibly can to avoid it. If you'd like to go to the Master Drive website, there's pledges that organizations and individuals can take to refrain from participating or imbibing alcohol when they should not be doing so, and they should be dedicating that to the task of driving. I would also just like to share one other important statistic that is not noted. The number of incidents where distracted while driving contributes toward crashes. A notable insurer is on record as saying that 60% of the crashes that they reported or recorded indicated that a driver had been on their cell phone immediately prior to that. And whilst we look forward with some degree of trepidation toward ARTO will introduce, we do trust that the spirit of it will contribute significantly toward a reduction in fatalities and crashes on our road. You will have noted the number of people in attendance. As I alluded to earlier, we had 500 registrations. The balance that you see here may not necessarily have attended on Zoom. They could well be, and in fact are on our YouTube platform. A recording of this will be made available to you. So if there's any questions, we please direct you immediately to look at our AFP website. We will share that by way of thank you for those in attendance and those who didn't. So if you know of anybody who did register, please be aware of the fact that we will be able to share that at a later stage. And if I can just conclude before we have a look at the winners of our prizes, we've assembled a panel of experts, in our opinion, that will be able to talk to the issues. If you noted, one of the areas over there, Alta Swanepoel, who of course is able to run workshops on legislation changes, and we expect that very soon we're going to have some further information. So if we can start with the prizes, this has been a random draw, aware.org. The prize there is 4 hampers consisting of a t-shirt, cap, and key ring. The names there that we have is Mabatu Matewani from Petra SA, Teresa Nell from NAMSA, Vishnu Paramulsimi from Geotab, and Adrian van der Berg from Twiza. So please, we will be making contact with you, but please feel free to give our team a shout. Avis have proudly contributed a 2 by point-to-point services in an economy vehicle, which is probably a Rolls-Royce, also seen as a complimentary chauffeur service between Bloemfontein, Cape Town, Durban, or Johannesburg in their main centers. Sean Ratsamani from Primedia and Madeleine Nassane from Rento Kill. AfriSam have also given us 2 prize hampers. Jacques van Wyk, Aramax, and Spiros Marinas from Tracker. That is a branded cooler box and a set of tumblers worth 1,000 Rand each. Body stress release. I'm pretty sure that most people are stressed or feeling stressed today. It's a treatment that will enable you feel de-stressed. 2 body stress release sessions valued at about 550 Rand each. Annalise Scudder from Servest and Deepak Nanan from Bala World. Thanks to Equestra, to goodie bags which feature UV sleeves, cap, a convenient plastic bag dispenser, a pen, and a handy calendar valued at 300 Rand each. If you sell them on the open market, you probably get 600 Rand. The names of the winners there are Gilbert Lewitz from Montego, Maritz de Villiers, Sanitech, and Ricky Volangano from Neo Pomenso Logistics. And then Old Mutual, thanks to them. We have a picnic basket hamper, Wendy Detterly from TFG. And then after that, we have from Bobby, kind courtesy of his Eco Fire Extinguishers, one Eco Fire Class fire-friendly extinguisher, and that goes to Dio Pesada Ramjet from East Rand Bulk. And then one of our long-term partners is Optics, one by Surflight Driver Behavior Video Telematics Device, value just under 10,000 Rand, Kevin van Wyk from Super Group. And that then, of course, brings us to a conclusion for which we'd like to thank everybody who participated and who attended. And please feel free to look at our website for AFP. And if there's anybody that you know that could benefit from upbuilding association, gathering intelligent data, and being the beneficiary of prizes such as this, please let them know. So with that, thank you very much and have a good day.
Sometimes there's no one else who loves me like you used to. Sometimes we're not ourselves, there's no one I can turn to.